Welcome to Conversations for the Animals. I'm Lisa Tynan with Houston PetSet, and I am joined today by Mary Tipton, who is, if you work in animal welfare and you haven't heard Mary's name, you must be hiding under a rock, because you are incredibly well known throughout the rescue community as being a staunch advocate for animals, but also for being incredibly hardworking. You have not one but two organizations that you run. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I can barely find the time to make myself breakfast in the morning, so I don't know how you do it. Today, I want to talk to you about both of those organizations, about what they do, how they work together, or whether they are, joined or not, and sort of what you see as the biggest hurdles that we are facing in animal welfare to solving this animal welfare crisis. So we have a lot to dive into today. But first, I want to hear about you. I want to hear, how did you get started in animal welfare? Is this something you've done your whole life? Is this something you fell into? What is your story?
Well, my story, thank you for having me, Lisa. It's such a pleasure to be here. And Houston PetSet has been a huge help with the rescue community here in Houston. So that is a needed thank you. About me, though, I grew up in South America, in going to the market with my mother, and getting ringworm from kittens underneath the stalls, little bitty. And my mother at a young age, I remember, was saying, don't handle the kittens when we go to market. I was always an animal lover. I always had to touch them, hold them, love on them, and bring them home if they didn't have a home. And so this has just been me. Yeah. But I've been in Houston now, the Houston area, over 30 years, 31 years, I think. And I have been deep in rescue since I've been here. I started in Austin, and I was a foster and stuff. But here in Houston, I've been fosters, and I've been with three big organizations here. And I met Christine Morgan at Buster's Friends when we were at Highland Village with the girls, with Tina and Tama. And so I knew her, and in 2011, we decided to start K-9 Angels Rescue because we thought we could do a good job with funding. You know, we could pinch a penny better than anybody and make it go a long way. And so she and I were really naive, and we started with $3,000, $1,500 from each of our accounts. And we have built it into this massive, huge two ordeals. We've been very, very fortunate. And so it just keeps growing, and we keep looking at new ways that we can help the community. Yeah. What used to be rescue was successful. Finding adopters were successful. Yeah. Pulling animals from the shelter, we thought we were going to pull them and nobody else was going to fill that void. Yeah. And when we realized that they were always, there's an influx of dogs always following us, that's when we turned our attentions to spay neuter.
Yeah, it's huge.
So K-9 Angels Rescue had some money back in 2016. One of our good volunteers, Miller Friedman, was at college in San Antonio, and he invited us to come over there and start watching SNPSA in San Antonio. Yeah. And see how they did these big MASH-style spay neuters. And so we got the idea, and they were so gracious. They let us plagiarize their forms and everything. They said, yes, just take everything. They shared everything. Take it to Houston, start this. And so in 2017, we had our first event. We had formed a DBA under K-9 Angels Rescue's 501c3, and the DBA is the Empty Shelter Project. Our hope is that in the future, there will be no dogs in the shelters, no cats in the shelters. And we go specifically into underserved communities. And we set up in gymnasiums. We had an event just March 25th in the Crosby High School. Yeah. And we alter, vaccinate, and microchip owned animals. This is not for rescue. Right. This is not for transport. This is for people who cannot afford or cannot get their animals to town. And so
it's huge. It's huge. And for clarification, because the first time, before I had really gotten involved, I was mostly on the sheltering side of things before I came over to Houston PetSet. And so I wasn't really familiar with everything else that was going on. And in my brain, the Empty Shelter Project and Empty the Shelters kept getting crossed. So if anyone has heard of those two things and don't realize, Empty the Shelters is an adoption promotion, basically, that happens once or twice a year, and it's nationwide. The Empty Shelter Project is completely separate, and it is focused on keeping shelters empty by preventing animals from coming into it.
Correct.
Focusing on the before problem, not the adoption part afterwards.
Correct.
So that's a big differentiation. So I want to focus first on K-9 Angels, because how many animals a year do you think you're seeing coming through your doors?
We are not like we used to be.
Okay.
The pandemic changed the whole landscape of our rescue. We have an adoption center on 19th Street that we are losing and letting the lease go at the end of May. Yeah.
Okay.
We pay $6,000 a month for a lease, and we just do adoption days 1 day a week, which is just ridiculous. When we started K-9 Angels Rescue, I was the first rescue that was allowed into the Harris County Animal Shelter on Canino Road.
Wow.
And it was back when Dawn Blackmore was still the director over there, and she had been for 30 years. Yeah. But the idea was that rescues made money off of adoptions. And so they didn't want rescues coming in, I was told. So when I finally talked them into letting us come in there was an 11% live release rate of the Harris County shelter.
Wow.
And I paid $37.50 for every animal I took from the shelter, because I had to pay for the rabies shot and the DHPP and the microchip. I paid for that. So, and it was crazy.
It sounds so backwards from how we think of it now.
Yes.
That's crazy. Okay.
But you can imagine with a 11% live release rate, I went in there and I was like a kid in the candy store. I was like, I'll take you. I was taking hundreds of animals a week. Wow. And we were doing, K-9 Angels Rescue was doing 30 to 40 animals adopted every week. We were humming. It was, we had 600 volunteers in our volunteer base, our foster base. We were huge. Yeah. And like I said, the pandemic changed all of that. And also, everybody in Houston owns 2 or 3 dogs.
We're sort of saturated.
We are saturated, and they're still being born. We would pat ourselves on the back and say 36 dogs adopted. And I don't mean just adopted to anybody, adopted to people who are going to keep them in the home, provide them with heartworm prevention, really, really make them a part of the family. And then I would get an email from somebody saying, my dog had 12 puppies, this week. Can you help me? And I'd get 3 or 4 of those, and it would negate the entire effort of adoption. So we said, what can we do? What can we do to get in front of the birth?
Yes. So let me ask you this, because you said you were doing that many adoptions a week, and pulling these animals out of the shelters and finding homes for them. And there have been more recently, as we've been kind of trying to delve in and really find the root causes of the unbelievable homeless animal crisis right now in Houston. Are you finding from the rescue side that adoptions have slowed? Have views on adoptions changed? I know it's easy to say, the market is saturated, because it really does feel like everybody who wants a pet has a pet. But animals grow old and they die, and people move in and out. But it still feels like fewer people are adopting now than they were. But maybe that's just my personal
We had an adoption event this past week. Christine Morgan is our adoption counselor, and she still holds them about once a month. I mean, we do adoptions online all the time and every weekend, but we still have an adoption event at our center about once a month. People are getting pickier about the dogs. We are so saturated in pit bull mixes. Yeah. And, I have 3 bullies at my house. I love the breed. But at some point, I'd like to own something besides a bully. And almost every dog in Houston is a bully mix. Yeah. And it's a very controversial subject, but I am very pro mandatory spay-neuter.
Okay.
And people say, well, that puts the burden on low income. Mm-hmm. And I said, it's not a burden if you provide them an outcome.
Right.
The option is a free spay neuter.
Right. But
we cannot continue. And I think it should be across Texas, because if you look at all of the transport receiving partners and all the rescuers in the north trying to help Texas out. It is all over Texas. It's in the Valley.
Yeah.
It's in Del Rio. It's in Odessa, Midland. It's everywhere. Amarillo. We have dogs coming out our ears in Texas. And when we mandate spay neuter and say no more backyard breeding, no more just not making this a priority. This needs to be a priority in our communities.
Absolutely.
And then if you want to be a breeder, get a breeder's license. You know, breed responsibly. Let us help you be responsible in this breeding practice.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
I don't want to say nobody should be a breeder, but we need
there
to help
needs to be some regulation. You know, it's funny you mentioned that. Right now in the Texas legislature, you know, there's a bill being presented trying to get through committee that would Texas for some reason is the only state that Texas has the highest minimum number of breeding females required to be considered a breeder.
What is it now?
It's currently 11.
Okay, well, we tried to pass this through in 2016 maybe or something.
I forget when, but yes.
And I wrote a letter to Dan Patrick's office and said, please vote to restrict this. And the response from a lot of our politicians is, we don't want to restrict people's livelihoods.
Right.
I said, come on, take a walk through our shelters. You know, how about the taxpayer dollars? You know, our little organization, K-9 Angels Rescue, doing the Empty Shelter Project spay neuters has spent since 2017 on, we just did our 25th spay neuter event. Wow. We have spent $1 million. Okay.
That's
now
outrageous.
we started with 3,000. Remember?
Yeah.
We have spent $1 million spaying and neutering animals in and around Houston, Harris County.
Right.
And we are guesstimating. Now remember, all of this is such a guess.
Right.
But if the shelter holds a dog, and this is a 2017 number.
Okay.
But if a shelter had to pick up a dog and house it for 3 days and euthanize it, it was something like $180. So on the animals that we have prevented from entering the shelter, and we're not saying that all of the animals that we are spaying and neutering will enter, but a portion will.
Of course.
We're saving taxpayers upwards of $4 million in housing and euthanizing dogs. We rarely keep dogs 3 days.
Right.
We have dogs at Harris County right now who have been there 100 days.
Right.
So what is it costing taxpayer money when we just don't say, let's stop this ridiculousness?
Right.
And when our politicians call it livelihood, it's not livelihood.
Right.
Because, like you said, the adoptions on a pit bull have slowed down.
They have.
Or the people that we want to have a pit bull,
they already have several.
They already have several.
Yeah.
And we don't want them in the wrong hands.
Right.
We don't want fighting dogs. We don't want dogs that are abused. Right. So we have saturated our market.
Yes, we have.
Many times over.
Many times over. And, you know, talking about livelihood, it's hard for people who are in the animal welfare and in the rescue community to think of pets as a profit, especially when we're bleeding money trying to take care of them. And none of us are turning any sort of profit. But it is true. There are people out there who maybe they love their dog and they want their dog to have a litter. But there are also people out there who are breeding purely for profit, not for love of animals, not because they care about the breed. It's literally just, well, you know, I paid $1,000 for this dog. I got to get some of that money back. So why don't I have some puppies?
I did a small event. Between all these big events, I do small events. I did 180 cats on Wednesday at my adoption center, and I did 47 animals,
dogs
and cats, spay, neuter,
yeah.
vaccination, microchip. I did 47 on Thursday and I did 43 on Sunday.
Wow.
So this has been a busy week.
Yeah,
it's been a very busy week. But one of the people who came, now remember, this is a free event and we don't judge.
Okay.
You know, so people can come up in their fancy schmancy cars and take this free service. Yeah. But one of the ladies who came on Sunday had a purebred boxer. And I said, that is a darling dog. Mm-hmm. And she said, yeah, we decided to keep him and not sell him with the rest. And I said, well, where's the mama? Can I spay her? And she said, no, she's only 3 years old. We're going to keep breeding her. So here I am giving a free service and I'm biting my tongue and I'm saying, oh, you know.
Yeah. But at least we know that's one dog who's not contributing to it. And we got to take the wins where we can. That's such a tough situation. I want to pivot a little bit now because you're talking about all of these little events in between the big ones. I want to talk about the big ones because the numbers that we hear coming out of the Empty Shelter Project are astounding. So you said you've just done your 25th
Big event.
Big event, right? And at these one day for the uninitiated, tell us what a MASH style event looks like, because it's pretty outstanding.
It's 2 weeks of intense preparation of inventorying everything from gauze to suture to trash can liners,
Sure,
everything that we might need to take.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got a medical team that is inventorying their stuff. I'm in charge of registration and appointments, and I'm getting all of those pre-set and the packets ready. Because the day of is crazy, and then we get two big trucks, transport trucks, and we load everything up. We're an all volunteer organization, by the way. Nobody gets paid.
Amazing.
But we do pay our veterinarians and our vet techs who come to our big events. But what we pay them is a ridiculously embarrassing small, and a lot of them give it back. So they give a lot of their time.
Yeah.
But we pay the vet techs well, and we pay the veterinarians to come out. But we load everything up in two trucks, and we go out on Fridays to the area, to the place that we've chosen, usually a school or a gymnasium, warehouse, something that has enough room for us.
Right.
We unload, we set up. I have 358 dog crates that I set up, so I can do 358 dogs at any of these events. And then cat crates, we can do 300 or so cats. And so it's a variety. We usually hit around 500
in one day. I'm just going to keep stressing this, in one day.
Yes. Now again, COVID changed us. We were up and over 500 pre-COVID, and then we had to shut down for almost a year until we figured out this health crisis. Yeah. And now we've started back to amp it back up, but we've been careful because we've always wondered: is COVID going to come back? Is what's going to happen? So we've done a couple 500 events, and this last one was a small event. It was a 368
which
or something.
So amazing. That's incredible. So you said that you pay your vets and your vet techs. How many of these veterinary professionals are working at these events?
We have about 22 to 24 vets. We usually have 4 in the cat room, and we have 17 to 18 in the dog room. Wow. Some of them stay all day. Some of them come in the morning and have to leave, or come in work their own jobs at their own clinics and come in the afternoon.
Wow.
But we're getting good. So most of our surgeries are done by 3:00. So then we're breaking down. So we've done all the animals, but we still have to get the animals home. So we're calling the people. We keep female dogs 3 hours because we want to watch them. We keep male dogs minimum of 2 hours. But some of these people, there is no limit to how many. If you have 8 dogs at your house, we want to do all 8 of them, because otherwise we're going to still be having, you're going to have 12 next week, right? Or more. And so there is no limit to what you can bring. Then we have to get all 8 of those recovered and ready to go before we call the owners, So sometimes it's a late night for our take-home team.
Sounds like there's just an unbelievable amount of logistical planning and management that has to go in before and then during. I mean, that's just, I would imagine the day after everyone's just sort of draped across their couch and not moving. Is there any requirement of an owner? Is it income restricted? Is it by neighborhood? Is it literally anyone can show up to one of these days by appointment?
We try to do by zip code because when we have a community that gives us a community center or a high school to use, we target that area around it. Every once in a while, like we did one in Cloverleaf in December of last year. And we added some people in Channelview because that whole area is really tough. Yeah. And so we will expand because we know the areas that are really needed. Sure. But we also have done 4 or 5 in Denver Harbor at the Denver Harbor Community Center, and Carla Cisneros helps us get that community center all the time. Yeah. And so that area we've pretty well saturated. And because our last event in February was our 5th event, we had to reach a little further because we had reached everybody.
Which is such a great problem to
have.
Yes,
that's a good problem.
That's fantastic. Yes. So you mentioned Councilwoman Cisneros. When you are doing these events, is City Council involved? Is the city aware? Are they sort of supporting your efforts and advertising for you?
She does.
She does. We love Carla Cisneros.
She does.
She really supports the spay-neuter mission.
Yes, she does. And we do have some county commissioners who help us quite a bit. And we do have a few city council members that help us, but it's dogs are sometimes down on the totem pole because people need our attention too. So.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a really good point. But the benefit of these events isn't just for the pets. It's absolutely for the people and the families.
I think that's probably been the biggest lesson that I've learned through the years is whether you're a mother who lives in Memorial or whether you're a mother who lives in Cloverleaf, you want the same thing for your children and yourself. You want them to be able to walk to school safely without being attacked by a group of dogs. You want them to be able to ride their bicycles in the streets. And a lot of these neighborhoods, they cannot because the dog population is so bad.
It's terrifying.
So it was amazing because we went over and block walked in Cloverleaf just to meet the people and let them know that we were going to be there because trust is a big thing.
Absolutely.
I'm not immigration. I'm not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. Your status doesn't matter to me. Let's just help you with your animals. And so we knock on doors and talk to a lot of people. Okay. But even when we were out there knocking on doors, one of my volunteers says, turn around and look behind us. And we had 6 dogs following us, big dogs. And, they're just always there. They're always there. So, it's a little nerve-wracking.
Sure.
It's a little nerve-wracking because if they were mean, they would have hurt us.
Yeah,
but,
you're in trouble.
So I can understand that these mothers, they want their homes, their home to increase in value, not decrease in value. They want their children's schools to be good. And when money's not in the community because of a dog problem, when businesses won't come because of the dog problem, that affects the entire community.
It's such an important point. With Houston PetSet, a lot of the work that we do is in advocacy and is trying to talk about not just the core problem that we're trying to address, which is the animal homelessness, but also how it affects the city. I mean, Houston is the 4th at some point to be the 3rd largest city in the country. It is a hugely well-known business community. It's incredibly international. It's a destination now that people come to, and our image is affected by what people see when they walk through the streets.
Right.
So it's a human health crisis. It's a financial crisis. It's a community. It touches every part of our life. And so by being able to drop into these communities and earn their trust and say, we're here to help you and your pets, not just the animals, I think is hugely important. The next question I want to ask you is, obviously, both of these organizations, the DBA and K-9 Angels, these are nonprofits. How much money does one of these MASH style events cost you?
The big events cost between $40,000 and $50,000.
Okay, so you have to fundraise for those, correct? So you have, I'm assuming you have a couple of wonderful regular supporters, or does most of your money come from one-time donations? Who is supporting this mission?
We have a couple of donors that want to stay private.
Sure.
And we do, and we're very appreciative.
Of course.
We do a horrible job, again, being an all-volunteer organization. Yeah. My husband, who got recruited to be the president of K-9 Angels when he was on a business trip.
He was voluntold.
He was voluntold. He was in Sweden on a business trip, and we needed a new president, and we elected him in absentia.
Amazing.
And he has wanted to quit since the first day, every day. But he writes a few grants. He does. And we have written a few grants with the city of Houston.
Okay.
And but that limits us to only doing those animals in the city of Houston.
Yes.
And so we appreciate those grant givers that allow us to, a dog doesn't know city and county boundaries. And so, and people are very transient, they have to move from one place to another, and it might be across the city limit line, but they still need the service. And so we try not to limit ourselves too much, but there are some events that we have to do to meet the criteria for a grant. Yeah. But we're horrible at raising money because we don't have a good person who is a promoter, is a grant writer.
We're putting out the call. If you are listening or watching,
if you would like to,
contact Mary Tipton, K-9 Angels. Right. I mean, and it is something that a volunteer can do. I think some people don't realize when they think of wanting to participate or volunteer with an animal welfare organization. I cannot tell you, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, the number of people that I know who are good friends or even family who say, "Oh, I could never do what you do. It's too heartbreaking." Well, you don't actually have to go and pick the animals up off the street. You
do what you do.
Yeah,
do what you do
media.
best. Right.
Write a grant if you
Right.
work in business and you're really good at budgeting and you come up with any way to get involved helps, because there are organizations like yours who are all volunteer run. People have full-time jobs that they're also trying to do. So there are ways to get involved and ways to help that may, to the average person be like, well, how much help could it be if I, share this fundraiser on Facebook?
It's huge.
Huge.
Social media is huge.
It really is. And it feels like these days it's almost like the most bang for your buck, because even if you boost a post on Facebook, you can put $5 or $10 in. If that means 2,000 more people see your post and potentially donate, it's worth it.
But one of the things that's been really, really funny, not funny, but really eye-opening is if I have a dog that has a horrible injury, I can get a lot of money.
You can raise a lot of money
right?
off of it. Yep.
But if I say we are going to go into this underserved community and spay and neuter as many as we can in one day for free, it won't cost them anything, I might get $10 in donations.
Crickets.
Right?
It's weird,
Nothing.
isn't it? Yeah.
And to let taxpayers know that this is going to save us as a society killing dogs. Oh my gosh!
There's something that's not computing somewhere.
No.
Yeah, no. I think I share that observation. I think it is, and it's worth noting, that some of that may fall on us, on the rescue community, because we know that's how we can fundraise. When we have that great story, we will lean on that. But maybe it's time to start focusing a little bit more on the education of what happens to those 500 plus animals if they don't get spayed or neutered.
Well, and along those lines, sort of along those lines, but this thought that
near
just
the
came,
lines, yes.
A lot of people want to say, and Houston PetSet helped us with a grant for Cleveland in early 2022. So we got $20,000 to alter all these animals from Cleveland, because nobody helps. Cleveland
they're just
doesn't
left
have
by themselves.
They are, and so we blew past that, and by the end of last year, we had spent $32,000.
Wow.
Okay, so we just kept going because we had this need in Cleveland, and it still has a need. I do. Of those 180 cats last Wednesday, 91 of them were from Cleveland. And we sent our van up there to pick them up and bring them home. Again, my husband, who doesn't like this, he was the driver of the van. Anyway, but
bless his heart, I love that.
But our idea when we look at these communities on the outskirts of our neighborhoods, people point fingers and say they have too many dogs. They didn't ask for those dogs.
No.
Those dogs a lot of times wandered into their yard, and somebody felt sorry for them, gave them some food, and they've never left. And now we've started having puppies, and they're like, I can't stop this. I can hardly feed my kids. And I have been to places where I know the mothers can hardly feed their kids. And I've picked up 12 dogs in my van, brought them to our center, altered them all, and I kept the ones that they didn't want to keep and took back the ones that they could keep and could feed. But these communities are dumping grounds for our unwanted dogs. And so when we don't look at this as a community problem and we just say it's their problem, no, it's our problem. Because some of your neighbors are dumping dogs out there.
Yep. If I could stand up and give a round of applause, I mean, that's exactly right. And I hate this tendency of not just the rescue community, of everybody, to vilify the people who are actually trying their hardest, to just don't have the resources, or are being actively denied the resources to address it. So thank you for expressing that.
I have donation jars that I put out. I'm going to try not to cry when I say it, but I have donation jars that I put out when people come to pick up their animals. And so we have a group of volunteers who is going over the post-op instructions. This is what you need to do to take care of your dog or cat after post-op. And I'll be standing up there talking to people and thanking them for coming to our event and bringing their dog and being responsible dog owners, cat owners. And the husbands will be digging in their pockets and giving us in these donation jars everything they had. Well, I took the donation jar to Christine and I dumped it out, and we had $86.30. And we had done something like 400 animals. And she said, "That's all you got?" And I said, That's everything they had.
Yeah.
And it meant the world to them. And you just say, okay, Okay.
Then let's do it again.
Let's do it again.
Let's keep doing it. That's such a beautiful sentiment, and it's the perfect place to end because it perfectly encapsulates why what you are doing is so incredibly important. Because, back to the beginning of your story about how there was this weird concern that rescues and people in animal welfare would somehow be profiting off of this, and it's just now looking back, it's laughable, but it's sometimes hard for people to see the heart and soul and blood and sweat and tears that goes into it, but the reward that comes out of it for the animals being safe and healthy and for the people being safe and healthy, you can't put a price tag on that. That right there is your profit. So thank you for everything that your organizations are doing, for being a voice, because we know you've got a voice and you aren't afraid to use it. And that's huge. If word gets around, I mean, it's just, as a fellow,
I've been told by city councilmen that I have angst. I said, you think?
That's a nice way to put it, I think. It's actually a burning, fiery rage, but
yes,
angst will do. I can completely relate. Mary Tipton, this has been absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for all you do, for all of your amazing volunteers at K-9 Angels and at the Empty Shelter Project. We'd love to have you back, and we're really so grateful for the work that you're doing for our entire Houston community. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This has been Conversations for the Animals. We will see you next time.
Thank you, Lisa.